So thank you for sharing my session. My name is Anzhi, and I'm currently a postdoc at KTH. Yeah, I was really hoping to be in Chicago in person, but unfortunately there is some issue about my visa, so I can only join remotely from Stockholm, and I was really hoping this will not affect the discussion too much. I'll be very happy to discuss more after this talk online. So let me jump into the main idea of this work. So in this talk, rather than simply talking about finding a way to promote cooperation by introducing some mechanism, we are actually interested in the potential risk or negative effect of widespread cooperation when we operate in those mechanism or policies, and especially their role in generating wealth inequality. So first, I would like to briefly introduce why we care about cooperation, even though I believe like most talk before me have already touched it. So let me take the public goods game as an example. This is a standard multiplayer social dilemma game when the synergistic factor R on contribution is smaller than the number of participants, which is 4 here. So this is because the defector can act as a free rider and share the public benefit without paying any contribution. So the rational strategy for each individual or the Nash equilibria for each individual should be defection. But actually, this equilibria is not that good or efficient because at both individual or population level, their benefit or the payoff will just be 0. In contrast, if the whole population is in the collective cooperation state, then they will have a higher payoff. Actually, they will maximize both individual and group interest. So that's why collective cooperation is often the ideal outcome in a social dilemma. And even though cooperation is kind of vulnerable to exploitation by defectors, we actually can observe a great amount of prosocial behavior in our human societies. So in the literature of evolutionary game theory, there are two very kind of fundamental questions. The first one is why cooperation can evolve in the population. And the second one is like how to promote the evolution of cooperation by introducing some mechanism. But most research like just stop at answering those two questions without questioning what is the potential consequence of widespread cooperation might be. For example, in a social network where different individuals have different social status or connectivity, the widespread cooperation can easily cause wealth inequality compared to the defective society, because in a defective society, everyone just has 0 wealth and it's totally equal. But in a cooperative one, some individual will have a higher payoff and cause some inequality. Especially when we talk about the public goods game in social networks where where the individual will receive a benefit based on a particular benefit allocation rules, and this benefit allocation rules will easily simultaneously affect the evolutionary direction of cooperation, and also will affect the wealth distribution in a population. So we are actually wondering like if there exists a benefit allocation rule that might simultaneously promote cooperation, but also will increase wealth inequality. And if it does exist, we may need to consider if we just only aim to promote cooperation by modifying the allocation rule to that rule and just overlooking the potential risk provided by increasing wealth inequality. So to study that question, we actually consider the asymmetric public goods gain in the population. So basically, this model begin with a structured population where each individual occupy a node in a social network, and they can choose between cooperation and defection. And then each individual at each time step will receive an endowment of a fixed size C. If an individual is a cooperator, then at each time step, he will just evenly divide the C to each interactions. For example, for this individual I, since he has 3 interactions, if he is a cooperator, then he donates C over 3 to each interaction. Similar for J, if he is a cooperator, he will contribute C over 4 to each interaction because he has 4 neighbors or interactions. And if an individual is a defector, then he will retain his endowment and contribute nothing. Then the public pool will generate a public benefit based on the amount of social goods in the pool, and also based on the function f, which could be linear and nonlinear. And this public benefit B, capital B, is typically larger than the amount of contributions. Then this B will be divided to these 2 individuals based on a given allocation rules, and this allocation rule is represented by Mij and Mji. So the freedom of this model is we can design how to allocate or distribute this public benefit to the participant. And here we introduce 2 kind of natural and kind of fair allocation rule. So the first one we call equitable allocation, which means the proportion of benefit an individual can get is proportional to their potential contribution. By potential, we mean, for example, even if this individual I is a defector, he contributes nothing, the proportion he can get is proportional to the contribution when they are a cooperator. So even though this I is a defector, he will still have a 4 over 7 B from the public pool. And this rule simply means you can get more when you contribute more. And a straightforward example is like it's like in a stock market. The second rule we call uniform allocation, which simply means everyone just get 1/2. And the straightforward example is like the credit allocation of a pure math paper because the authorship there is just alphabetic. I want to mention like these 2 rules are all seem fair, but they will actually lead to very different outcome for cooperation and equality. And also I want to emphasize that I will use this model to discuss a broad range of population structures, but the main idea of this model is not to compare between different population structure, but we're trying to compare the average outcome using different allocation rules for given population structure, which is kind of more realistic somehow because it's somehow more easier to design or to change these allocation rules or this allocation policy by the government or the organizations rather than force a population to change their topology from one to another. So we are actually caring about how these allocation rules will affect cooperation and equality. And before I move to the case study, I want to first show the theoretical part. So first I want to mention like in this model, we should definitely use accumulated payoff because everyone have the same endowment C at each time step. So accumulated payoff definitely makes more sense than average payoff. And then we can see panel A. This is the interaction between 2 individuals, and the cost term for individual is just appear as 1 term because it only depends on whether you are a cooperator or defector. But the benefit term can be divided into 3. The first part comes from the endowment of yourself because of public goods gain. The second part comes from the endowment of your opponent. So if your opponent is a cooperator, then you will have a benefit, and if he's a defector, then you will have a zero benefit. The third term is like an additional bonus or discounting when your the focal individual and the opponent are both cooperators, and that contribution function is somehow nonlinear. So that's the three part of the benefit. And then this setup can easily extend it to the network setting with evolution. And actually, we use this as an intuition to understanding this condition for cooperation to be favored by natural selection under weak selection. And so this is and to derive this result, we simply just use the standard collapsing theory technique. Then I want to show this first two network structures. So basically, we want to using the theoretical result to calculate the critical ratio and also the Gini coefficient under both equitable allocation and uniform allocation, and to compare the difference. So for the network in panel A, when we move in from uniform allocation to the equitable allocation, we can see the critical ratio decrease, which means cooperation is easier to evolve, but simultaneously, the Gini coefficient also increase, which means there is more inequality there. What is even worse is on the uniform allocation, there is 96% of individual with a negative return, which means for those individuals, they are rather be in the all defector societies, because in that case, their benefit is just zero. But in all cooperative states, they even have a worse or negative return. So there's a conflict between cooperation and inequality, because if we move into allocation, uniform allocation, it's easier for cooperation to evolve, but there is a higher level of inequality there. But this conflict will not always exist for any population structures. For example, in the network shown in panel B, where the degree variance is kind of high, there is no conflict because uniform allocation can neither promote cooperation or can decrease inequality. Then we have this a more systematic investigation over a broad range of network structures, where we consider network size of 50 with number 32,000 of networks, and also larger networks of size 200, and the number of networks is 81,000. And we can find like 69% of networks for size 50 has those conflict, which means unified allocation can promote cooperation, but simultaneously increase wealth inequality. And also 65% of networks for size 200 with these conflicts. They are all shown in the red region of this heat map in panel A and D. And we can see like all these networks, all the networks without conflicts are either have a very high average degree or with a very high degree variance. For panel B and E, we calculate the difference in Gini coefficient under uniform allocation and equitable allocation, and we can see Gini coefficient is often higher when we use this uniform allocation. And for panel C and F, we show the fraction of individuals with negative payoff under uniform allocation, and then we can see so there is some social networks do have this worse off scenario when using uniform allocation. We also consider some empirical social networks, and in this case, we actually consider a convex combination of two allocation rules controlled by parameter karma, and the result it persists. The conflict also persists between in these four empirical social networks, and actually we can locate this four social networks roughly to the to the heat map I showed in the last slides, like panel A, and they are all lying within this red region, which means they have that conflict. And the natural extension, because we talk about public goods games, so a natural extension is we should consider multiplayer games and also on hypergraphs. So here we use this fan graph as an example to discuss this scenario where each individual will simultaneously engage in two-player public goods game along this pairwise edge, and also the three-player games in these triangles, or we call it branch. And the cooperative will divide its endowment to each possible interaction they involve. And the result also still persists in this multiplayer scenario where cooperation and equality is still in conflict. We also did more extensions such as strong selection with multiple simulations and also dynamic social network interactions and also with mutation and so on. And for all of this result, we all observe like the conflict between cooperation and equality remain pronounced. So to sum up, our argument is like promoting cooperation often involves a trade-off between equality, and it can even explicitly harm the individual who has a very low degree. So therefore, mutual cooperation is not always benefit to the whole society. And this result just want to highlight a need for policymaker to weigh the value of cooperation and also against the potential risk of inequality. Yeah, and also for this work, I would like to thank all my collaborators here: Josh Long from Peking University, Alex, and also Qi Su from Shanghai Jiao University. Thank you.
Thank you, Anzhi. Any questions? Yeah.
Hi, Anji. This is Naoki. So thanks for great talks. My question is in regards to do you have any understanding about what kind of network structure yields a higher level of conflict over other networks?
So basically, I don't know how to quantify a higher level. So I think that's a great question, because in this work we don't actually quantify the level of conflicts. We just have the result of if this network has conflict, and we find the networks with kind not that large average degree and not that large degree of variance have conflicts, but we do not have a metric to
I understand. Right.
To measure the level of conflicts.
I was curious. Whether some networks say these somehow say more easily to the conflict, but I understand your point. You didn't quantify. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Angie, I don't want to say hi. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Fan Fu. Yeah.
Hi.
I really miss you. Yeah.
I really miss you too. Yeah. Hope you can visit Stockholm sometime.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.